You've been running so long, you forgot what you were running from, until one night in the silence, you realize you were running from the only person who could save you. You wake up tired, not the kind of tired sleep fixes, the kind that sits in your chest, the kind that makes you wonder if this is all there is. You look around at your life and it looks fine. It looks successful even. But inside, there's this weight, this quiet voice that keeps asking, is this really it? And you silence it. You silence it with work, with distractions, with people, with noise. Anything to keep from hearing what that voice is trying to tell you. Because deep down, you know. You know you've been performing. You know the person everyone sees isn't the full truth. You know you've been wearing a mask so long, you're not even sure what your real face looks like anymore. And the exhausting part, the mask is heavy. Maintaining the image is draining. Keeping up the appearance takes everything you have. And still, you do it. Because facing yourself feels more terrifying than continuing the lie. You fill your calendar because empty space scares you. You scroll because stillness feels dangerous. You surround yourself with people because being alone means hearing your own thoughts. And those thoughts, they ask questions you don't want to answer. They remind you of promises you broke to yourself. They show you the gap between who you said you'd become and who you actually are. So you run. You stay busy. You stay moving. You convince yourself that motion equals progress. But here's what nobody tells you about running from yourself. You can't outrun you. You can change cities. You can change jobs. You can change relationships. You can change your entire life. But everywhere you go, there you are. The same patterns, the same fears, the same emptiness, different scenery, same internal landscape. Because the problem was never your location. It was never your circumstances. It was always the person in the mirror you refuse to face. You seek approval because you don't approve of yourself. You need validation because you don't feel valid. You chase achievement because you feel worthless without it. You collect people because you feel empty alone. And none of it works. Not really. Because you're trying to fix an internal problem with external solutions. You're putting band-aids on bullet wounds. You're decorating a house with a cracked foundation, and the cracks keep spreading. Maybe you grew up feeling like you had to earn love, like you had to perform to be worth keeping, like who you were naturally wasn't enough. So you learned to adapt. You learned to shift. You learned to become whatever the room needed, and you got good at it. So good that you forgot there was a real person underneath all those adaptations. So good that the performance became your identity. Until one day you looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the person staring back. Or maybe life broke you. Maybe rejection taught you to hide. Maybe betrayal taught you not to trust. Maybe disappointment taught you not to hope. Maybe pain taught you not to feel. And slowly, piece by piece, you buried the real you. You built walls. You created defense mechanisms. You protected yourself so thoroughly that you locked yourself in a prison of your own making. Safe but suffocating. Protected but paralyzed. Defended but dying inside. And the cruelest part, you're exhausted. You're tired of pretending. You're tired of performing. You're tired of hiding. You're tired of running. But you don't know how to stop. Because stopping means facing everything you've been avoiding. Stopping means dealing with the pain you've been postponing. Stopping means admitting the truth you've been denying. And that feels impossible. So you keep moving. One more goal, one more achievement, one more relationship, one more distraction, one more day of convincing yourself that tomorrow you'll deal with it. Tomorrow you'll face it. Tomorrow you'll be honest. But tomorrow never comes. Because tomorrow is just another word for not today. And not today becomes your anthem, the song you sing every morning when you wake up and choose the mask over the mirror. You tell yourself, everyone does this. Everyone pretends a little. Everyone wears masks sometimes. And maybe that's true. But what you're doing isn't occasional. It's constant. It's not a mask you wear. It's a mask you've become. And there's a difference. There's a difference between protecting yourself occasionally and hiding yourself completely. There's a difference between being strategic and being fake. There's a difference between wisdom and self-abandonment. And deep down, beneath all the noise and movement and distraction, there's a part of you that knows, a part that's tired of lying, a part that wants to be seen, a part that's suffocating under the weight of the performance. A part that's screaming, this isn't living, this is surviving, this is existing, this is waiting to die while pretending to be alive. That part, that's the real you. The one you've been running from, the one you've been silencing, the one you've been starving while feeding everyone else's version of who you should be. And that part is what scares you most, because you don't know if it's strong enough. You don't know if it's good enough. You don't know if it's lovable enough. You don't know if the real you is worth keeping. So you never find out. You never test it. You never give the real you a chance. You just keep running. Keep pretending. Keep performing. Keep dying slowly while everyone applauds your life. Because at least the applause makes you feel something. At least the approval fills the void temporarily. At least the success distracts you from the emptiness. Until it doesn't. Until nothing works anymore. Until the mask cracks. Until you can't run anymore. And that's where you are now. That's why you're here. That's why these words are hitting differently. Because you're tired, you're done, you're ready. Maybe you don't know what you're ready for yet. But you know you can't keep doing this. You know something has to change. You know the running has to stop. Even if you're terrified of what happens when it does. There's a lion cub born in captivity that never learns to roar. It has the DNA. It has the capacity. It has everything it needs built into its design. But it grows up surrounded by silence, surrounded by safety, surrounded by walls that protect it from ever needing to discover what it really is. And one day, that cub is released into the wild, and it doesn't know how to hunt, doesn't know how to fight, doesn't know how to survive. Not because it isn't a lion, but because it never learned to be one. It never had to face itself in the wilderness where pretending isn't an option. That's you. That's what running from yourself does. It keeps you safe. It keeps you comfortable. But it also keeps you weak. It keeps you from discovering what you're actually made of. Because strength isn't built in comfort. Identity isn't found in crowds. Power isn't developed while you're performing for an audience. These things are forged in the wilderness, in the silence, in the place where there's no one to impress and nothing to hide behind, just you and the truth. And the truth is terrifying at first because the wilderness strips everything away. It removes the distractions. It silences the noise. It eliminates the escape routes. And suddenly, you're face to face with everything you've been avoiding. The shame sits there. The regret stares back. The disappointment speaks up. The pain you buried comes alive. And you realize why you were running. Because this hurts. This is uncomfortable. This feels like dying. But here's what the wilderness teaches you that comfort never could. Seeds don't grow in sunlight. They grow in darkness, buried in soil, covered in dirt, pressed down by weight, surrounded by what looks like death. And that seed, in that moment, has a choice. It can resist where it is. It can fight the pressure. It can refuse the process, or it can break open. It can surrender to the darkness. It can let the shell that protected it become the shell that's limiting it. And when it breaks, when it finally stops resisting and starts surrendering, that's when the roots go deep. That's when the growth begins. That's when transformation starts. You're that seed right now, planted in darkness, feeling the pressure, wondering if this is destruction or preparation. And everything in you wants to run back to the surface, back to the light, back to what's familiar. But you can't, not anymore, because you're already breaking. The shell is already cracking. And fighting it now won't stop the process. It'll just make it more painful. There was a craftsman who spent 40 years perfecting one skill, sharpening blades. And someone asked him why he worked in the dark, why he kept the lights off while he worked. And he said something that changed everything. He said, in the light, I can see what I'm doing. In the darkness, I can only feel it. And feeling teaches you what seeing never could. The blade tells me when it's ready. The metal speaks when I listen, but I can only hear it when everything else is silent. That's what facing yourself is. It's working in the dark. It's feeling instead of seeing. It's listening to what you've been too distracted to hear. The blade is your identity. The striking is the pain. The darkness is the isolation. And the sharpening? That's what happens when you stop running and start surrendering to the process you're in. But you've been measuring your worth by productivity, by output, by what you can show people. And in the wilderness, there's nothing to show. No updates to post. No progress to prove. No applause to collect. Just you in the dark, being shaped by a process no one else can see. And it feels like waste. It feels like you're falling behind while everyone else is moving forward. It feels like punishment when everyone else is being blessed. But forests don't grow with an audience. The tallest trees spent years underground developing root systems before anyone saw a single leaf. The strongest oaks weathered storms in silence before they provided shade. The deepest growth happens when no one is watching, where there's no performance required, where there's no pressure to look like you have it all together because you don't. And finally, you admitting it. Before I continue, answer one question honestly. When was the last time you sat in complete silence and didn't feel afraid of what you might hear? When was the last time you were alone with yourself and felt peace instead of panic? When was the last time you looked in the mirror and saw someone you actually respected? If you're still listening, something inside you is waking up. Something that's been asleep while you were running. Something that knows the running is over and the real work is about to begin. There was a person who filled every moment. Morning routines, work, gym, social events, Netflix, scrolling, calls, plans, anything, everything. Never a gap, never a pause, never a moment of silence. And then life forced a stop. An injury, a loss, a pandemic, doesn't matter what. But suddenly, everything stopped. The calendar cleared, the noise silenced, the distractions disappeared. And they were left alone with themselves for the first time in years. The first week was panic. The second week was anxiety. The third week was depression. Because without the noise, they could hear everything they'd been drowning out. Every regret, every failure, every broken promise, every compromised value. Every person they'd become that they swore they'd never be. And it was crushing. It felt like breakdown. Like everything was falling apart. Like they were losing their mind. But they weren't losing their mind. They were finding it. They weren't falling apart. They were coming together. For the first time, all the pieces of themselves they had scattered across different versions and performances and masks were being gathered into one place. And yes, it was messy. Yes, it was painful. Yes, it looked like destruction. But destruction is always the first step of reconstruction. And slowly, in that silence, something shifted. The panic turned to peace. The noise in their head turned to clarity. The shame turned to understanding. Because when you stop running, when you finally turn around and face what's been chasing you, you realize something shocking. It wasn't a monster. It was you, the real you. The buried you, the abandoned you, the version of yourself you left behind while you were busy becoming who everyone else needed. And that version, it's been waiting for you to come back. Waiting for you to remember. Waiting for you to stop performing and start being. The manufacturer always knows the design better than the product knows itself. A chair doesn't tell the carpenter how to build it. A sword doesn't instruct the blacksmith on how to forge it. A sculpture doesn't guide the artist's hand. They surrender to the maker's vision. They trust the process even when the process is painful. They don't resist the hammer because they understand the hammer isn't punishment. It's preparation. You were designed for something specific. Something that only you can do. Something that requires the exact combination of gifts and scars and experiences and perspective that only you possess. But you'll never discover it while you're pretending to be someone else. You'll never walk in it while you're performing for approval. You'll never access it while you're running from yourself because your purpose isn't found in the crowd. It's found in the mirror. It's found in the wilderness. It's found in the place where there's nothing left but truth. Who are you when no one's watching? Not who you present, not who you perform, not who you pretend to be when the spotlight is on, but who are you in the silence, in the dark, in the moments when there's no audience to impress and no reputation to maintain? That's the question that separates people who are living from people who are merely existing. That's the question that reveals whether you have character or just a carefully curated image. Because here's the truth most people never face. Your reputation is what people think you are. Your character is what you actually are. And the gap between those two things, that's where your soul lives or dies. That gap is either a graveyard of abandoned authenticity, or it's a garden where integrity grows. And you get to choose every single day, every single moment. You get to choose whether you're going to close that gap or widen it. You've been building a reputation carefully, strategically, protecting it, managing it, maintaining it. And it's exhausting because reputation requires constant maintenance, constant performance, constant energy. You have to remember what you told different people. You have to keep track of different versions of yourself. You have to manage everyone's perception. And one slip, one moment of authenticity that doesn't match the image, everything crumbles. But character doesn't need maintenance. It needs development. Character isn't about managing perception. It's about becoming someone worth being, someone consistent, someone whole, someone who doesn't have to remember what they said because they only speak truth. Someone who doesn't have to track different versions because there's only one version. Someone who doesn't have to manage perception because integrity manages it automatically. And you can't build character while you're running from yourself. You can't develop integrity while you're living in deception. You can't become whole while you're scattered across a dozen different performances. Character is built in the private moments, in the decisions no one sees, in the choices that cost you something but align with who you claim to be. Character is what remains when everything false burns away. Think about direction versus movement. You can be moving constantly and going nowhere. You can be busy every day and making no progress. You can be in motion perpetually and still be completely lost. Because movement without direction is just wandering. Activity without purpose is just distraction. Noise without meaning is just chaos. And that's what running from yourself creates. Constant motion, zero direction, endless activity, no purpose. You've confused being busy with being productive. You've confused being known with being significant. You've confused being successful with being fulfilled. And those are not the same things. Not even close. You can be busy and empty. You can be known and alone. You can be successful and miserable. Because those external markers don't fill internal voids. They just decorate them. They just make the emptiness look impressive from the outside. There's this idea that good is the enemy of right. That the comfortable choice is often the enemy of the correct choice. That what feels safe is usually what keeps you stuck. And you've been choosing good over right for so long, you've forgotten what right even feels like. You choose the good job that pays well over the right path that has purpose. You choose the good relationship that looks impressive over the right person who sees you. You choose the good image that gets applause over the right authenticity that costs you approval. And every time you choose good over right, you split yourself a little more. You create a little more distance between who you are and who you're presenting. You dig the hole a little deeper. You make the gap a little wider until one day you wake up and you don't even know who you are anymore. You've chosen good so many times that you've lost track of what's right. You've performed so long that you've forgotten what's real. But here's what happens when you stop. When you finally plant your feet and refuse to run anymore. When you turn around and face the truth you've been avoiding, everything starts to fall away. Every mask starts to crack. Every performance starts to exhaust itself. And what's left? What remains when the pretending stops? That's the real you. That's the foundation. That's what was buried under years of approval seeking and people pleasing and self-abandonment. There's a seed that falls into rocky soil, hard ground, difficult conditions, and that seed has two options. It can wish for better soil. It can resist where it's planted. It can compare itself to seeds in fertile ground. It can spend its energy complaining about the conditions, or it can do something different. It can break open right where it is. It can send roots down into the hard ground. It can push through the rocks. It can transform the very soil that seemed like its enemy into the foundation of its strength. And here's what happens. The roots that grow in rocky soil grow deeper. The trees that develop in harsh conditions grow stronger. The plants that push through difficult ground develop resilience that plants in easy soil never access. Because easy doesn't create strength. Comfort doesn't build character. Convenient doesn't forge depth. The difficulty is the gift. The resistance is the training. The hardship is the preparation for something bigger than you can currently imagine. You've been waiting for better conditions to start becoming yourself. You've been waiting for the right time to face the truth. You've been waiting for easier circumstances to do the hard work. But the conditions aren't going to get better. The time isn't going to feel right. The circumstances aren't going to get easier. This is it. This moment, this reality, this is where you break open. This is where you stop resisting and start rooting. This is where transformation happens. You don't heal by running. You heal by staying. You don't grow by pretending. You grow by breaking. You don't find yourself in the crowd. You find yourself in the mirror. You don't discover strength in comfort. You discover it in pressure. You don't develop wisdom in noise. You develop it in silence. You don't become whole by adding more. You become whole by removing what was never yours to begin with. Every mask you remove is freedom gained. Every performance you drop is energy returned. Every version of yourself you stop maintaining is peace restored. Because wholeness isn't about becoming more. It's about becoming focused. It's about integrating all the scattered pieces of yourself into one coherent identity. It's about being the same person in every room. It's about having nothing to hide because you've stopped lying about who you are. And yes, this cost you. It cost you approval from people who only loved your performance. It cost you relationships that were built on false versions of yourself. It cost you opportunities that required you to be someone you're not. It cost you the comfort of blending in. It costs you the safety of being acceptable to everyone. But what you gain is yourself. Whole, real, integrated, authentic, and that's worth every single thing you lose in the process. There are forests growing right now that no one is watching. Trees adding rings that no one is counting. Roots going deeper that no one is measuring. Growth happening that no one is applauding. And those forests, they're not worried about an audience. They're not concerned about approval. They're not stressed about perception. They're just growing silently, steadily, powerfully. Because real growth doesn't need witnesses. Real strength doesn't need validation. Real transformation doesn't need announcement. That's what you're learning in the wilderness, in the silence, in the place where you finally stop running. You're learning to grow without applause. You're learning to heal without audience. You're learning to become without performance. And it feels strange at first. It feels like you're invisible. It feels like you're being forgotten. But you're not being forgotten. You're being prepared. You're being shaped. You're being built into something that doesn't need external validation because it has internal foundation. Everything changes the moment you stop. Not tomorrow, not eventually, right now. The moment you plant your feet and refuse to run another step, the moment you turn around and face what you've been avoiding, the moment you look in the mirror and say, okay, here I am, this is the truth, this is where we start. That moment, that's when your real life begins. Everything before that was rehearsal. Everything before that was preparation. Everything before that was the long, exhausting journey that brought you to this exact point. And here's what nobody tells you about that moment. It's not dramatic. There's no orchestra playing. There's no crowd cheering. There's no lightning bolt from heaven. It's quiet. It's simple. It's just you finally being honest, finally stopping the performance, finally laying down the mask, finally surrendering the version of yourself that was never real to begin with. And in that simplicity, everything shifts, not around you, inside you. Because when you stop running from yourself, you stop running from everything else too. You stop running from your calling. You stop running from your purpose. You stop running from the life you were actually meant to live. You stop running from the person you were actually meant to become. And suddenly, all that energy you were using to maintain the lie, all that strength you were spending on the performance, all that power you were wasting on pretending, it's available now. It's yours. It's fuel for the real journey. You become unshakable. Not because nothing can hurt you, but because you've already faced the worst thing. You've already confronted the truth about yourself. You've already sat with your shame and your regret and your pain. You've already looked at the gap between who you are and who you thought you'd be, and you survived it. You're still here, which means there's nothing left to be afraid of. There's no secret that can be exposed. There's no mask that can slip. There's no performance that can fail, because you're not performing anymore. You're just being. And being doesn't require courage after you've already faced yourself. People will notice something different about you. They won't be able to name it at first, but they'll feel it. They'll sense that something has shifted, that you're operating from a different place now, that you're not seeking their approval the way you used to, that you're not performing for their validation anymore, that you're not adjusting yourself to fit their expectations. And some of them will love this new version. They'll be drawn to the authenticity. They'll respect the integrity. They'll trust the consistency. But others will hate it. They'll be uncomfortable with your honesty. They'll be threatened by your wholeness. They'll miss the version of you that needed them. They'll resent the version of you that doesn't perform anymore. And they'll leave or push you away or try to manipulate you back into the box they built for you. And this is where you'll be tested. This is where you'll be tempted to go back, to put the mask back on, to start performing again, to choose their approval over your authenticity. Don't you dare go back. Don't you dare pick up that mask again. Don't you dare start running after you finally learned to stand still, because everyone you lose in this process, they were only connected to the false version anyway. They didn't actually know you. They knew your performance. And losing an audience isn't the same as losing relationship. Losing applause isn't the same as losing love. What you're losing is fake. What you're gaining is real. You're going to discover things about yourself you never knew existed. Strength you didn't know you had. Courage you didn't know you possessed. Gifts you didn't know were buried. Passions you didn't know was sleeping. A voice you didn't know was silenced. A purpose you didn't know was waiting. Because all of those things were always there. They were just hidden under the performance, buried under the pretending, suffocated under the mask. And now that you've removed all of that, now that you've cleared away everything that wasn't real, there's space for what is. This is your moment. Not someday. Not when things get better. Not when you feel ready. Right now. This moment. This reality. This is where your story turns. This is where the victim becomes the victor. This is where the lost become the found. This is where the broken become the breakthrough. This is where everything you've been through starts making sense. Because it wasn't random. It wasn't meaningless. It wasn't wasted. It was preparation. It was training. It was the wilderness that taught you how to roar. You're not going back to who you were. You can't. That person doesn't exist anymore. That version of you died in the wilderness. What's walking out? What's emerging from the silence? That's someone new, someone stronger, someone clearer. Someone who knows exactly who they are because they've been tested. Someone who knows exactly what they're worth because they've been refined. Someone who knows exactly where they're going because they've been lost and found their way back. And the world needs this version of you, not the performing version, not the pleasing version, not the pretending version, the real version, the whole version, the integrated version. The version that doesn't need approval because it has integrity. The version that doesn't need validation because it has identity. The version that doesn't need applause because it has purpose. That version changes things. That version impacts people. That version leaves a mark that the false version never could. You're standing at a crossroads right now. One path leads back to comfort, back to performance, back to running, back to pretending, back to the exhausting cycle of seeking approval and maintaining image and managing perception. That path is familiar. It's easy. It's what you know. But it's also death, slow death, quiet death. The kind of death where you're still breathing but you're not actually alive. The other path leads forward into the unknown, into authenticity, into risk, into the possibility of rejection, into the reality of losing people who only knew your mask, into the work of becoming instead of pretending. That path is terrifying, it's difficult, it's uncertain, but it's also life. Real life, full life. The kind of life where you're actually present in your own story instead of performing in someone else's script. You can't walk both paths. You have to choose. And the choice you make in this moment will determine everything that comes next. Not just your circumstances, not just your success. Your soul, your wholeness, your peace, your purpose, your legacy. Everything hinges on this decision. Will you go back to running, or will you finally stand still and face yourself? The universe is holding its breath waiting for your answer. Not because you're special in some cosmic chosen one kind of way, but because your answer matters. Your choice has weight. Your decision creates ripples. Every person who stops running gives permission to someone else to stop. Every person who removes their mask makes it easier for someone else to be real. Every person who chooses authenticity over approval shifts the culture toward truth. If this message spoke to your heart, share it with someone who needs hope today. Someone who's been running, someone who's been performing, someone who's exhausted from pretending, someone who needs permission to finally stop and face themselves. And if you want more messages that grow your soul, that challenge your thinking, that push you toward the person you're meant to become, subscribe, because your journey hasn't ended. It's just begun. The running is over. The becoming has started. And what comes next, that's the part worth staying for. That's the part worth fighting for. That's the part worth showing up for. Welcome home to yourself. Now let's see what you're really made of.